Imagine a golden gleam, a serene gaze that spans millennia. The funerary mask of Tutankhamun is without doubt one of the most recognizable icons in human history. It evokes mystery, wealth, and the grandeur of a civilization lost in the sands of time. But what if I told you that this dazzling image, so familiar, hides a far more complex story full of twists, power, and intrigue? What if, behind that golden face, there was a young pharaoh who, in his brief existence, was forced to navigate an Egypt in crisis, an empire on the brink of collapse, and who, against all expectations, launched one of the greatest political and religious reconstructions of his age? Today, we go beyond the golden surface. We will plunge into the depths of ancient Egypt, into the heart of the 18th Dynasty, to uncover the true saga of Tutankhamun, not merely the boy king whose tomb remained untouched for centuries, but the ruler who inherited a legacy of heresy and chaos, and, amid conspiracies and challenges, tried to restore the glory of an empire. Prepare for a journey that will reveal not only the life of a king, but the pulse of a civilization at one of its most turbulent and fascinating moments. This is the story of Tutankhamun, power, intrigue, and the reconstruction of an empire. To understand Tutankhamun, we must first grasp the colossal shadow cast by his father, Akhenaten. The 18th Dynasty, before Akhenaten, was a period of unprecedented glory and prosperity for Egypt. Pharaohs such as Thutmose III and Amenhotep III had expanded the empire's borders, amassed wealth, and erected magnificent temples in honor of the traditional gods, especially Amarna, whose influence and power grew immense through his priesthood in Thebes. Egypt was a theocracy. Religion permeated every aspect of life, and the pharaoh was the divine link between men and the gods. The stability of the empire was inseparably tied to the maintenance of the cosmic order and justice ensured by the proper worship of the gods and the pharaoh's leadership. The priesthood of Amun, with its vast temples at Karnak and Luxor, accumulated lands, servants, and treasure, becoming a political and economic force almost as powerful as the pharaoh himself. They were the guardians of tradition, the interpreters of divine will, and their influence stretched from the highest court to the humblest peasant. Yet Amenhotep IV, who would later become Akhenaten, held a radically different vision. He did not merely question the Egyptian pantheon. He openly challenged it in a move that would echo through the ages. In an unprecedented act, he abandoned the traditional gods and proclaimed Aten, the sun disk, as the sole deity to be worshipped. Aten was not just another god among many. He was the supreme, creator god, and Akhenaten, his prophet and sole earthly intermediary. This was not a religious reform. It was a revolution, a heresy that shook the foundations of a millennial civilization. Aten's theology was singular, a universal, formless god represented only by the sun disk whose rays ended in hands, offering the Ankh, the symbol of life. Akhenaten and his queen, the legendary Nefertiti, were the only ones permitted to worship Aten directly, and the people were required to revere the pharaoh and queen. This dismantled the traditional religious structure, where every Egyptian maintained a relationship with multiple gods and goddesses, and where the priesthood mediated between the divine and mortal realms. The pharaoh changed his name to Akhenaten, he who is useful to Aten, and moved the capital from Thebes, the religious and political heart for centuries, to a brand new city he ordered built from scratch in the desert, Akhenaten, the horizon of Aten, today known as Amarna. This city, designed as a sanctuary for Aten and for the royal family, testified to Akhenat's devotion and vision. There, he and Nefertiti lived and ruled, devoting themselves entirely to Aten's cult and to a lifestyle that, to many, seemed eccentric and isolated. Temples were demolished, the names of gods erased from monuments, and the priesthood of Amun was stripped of its power, wealth, and lands. Statues of Amun were vandalized, and his name was systematically removed from inscriptions throughout Egypt. Akhenaten's religious iconoclasm left deep scars on the cultural and spiritual landscape of the country. The Amarna revolution was a seismic shock for Egyptian society. For a people who believed in Mat and in the necessity of honoring all the gods to guarantee prosperity and an afterlife, the imposition of a radical monotheism destabilized every level of life. The economy suffered as the vast resources that once sustained the traditional temples were redirected to Akhenaten and Aten's cult. Administration faltered, with the court isolated in its new capital, and the faith of the populace was shaken, generating confusion and resentment. While Akhenaten obsessively pursued his new religion and his ideal city, Egypt lost influence abroad. The Amarna letters, a collection of diplomatic correspondence from the period, reveal an empire in decline, with vassals pleading for help against invaders while the pharaoh seemed indifferent to their pleas. Internal order began to disintegrate, and loyalty among both the elite and the common people was tested to its limit. When Akhenaten died after roughly 17 years on the throne, he left behind an empire in turmoil, a power vacuum, and a nation deeply divided, teetering on the edge of chaos. This was the world into which Tutankhamun, born Tutankhamun, would ascend. The scene after Akhenaten's death was one of uncertainty and chaos. Succession was unclear, shrouded in mystery and speculation that still haunts scholars today. A brief reign by a pharaoh named Smenkhare followed, but his identity and tenure remain hotly debated. Some argue he may have been Tutankhamun's brother. Others suggest Nefertiti herself ruled under a male name to preserve stability during the volatile moment. What is clear is that the Egyptian throne was unstable, the dynastic line fragile, and the need to restore legitimacy urgent. Into this power vacuum, this moment of profound transition, a boy perhaps only 9 years old rose to the throne. Tutankhaten, the future Tutankhamun. His ascent was not a universally celebrated event but a delicate political maneuver orchestrated by those seeking to fill the void left by the heretical pharaoh. The identity of Tutankhamun's mother had long been a mystery, an enigma only beginning to be solved with modern science. DNA analyses of mummies from the Valley of the Kings, especially the one known as the young lady KV35YL, strongly suggest he was the son of Akhenaten and one of his sisters. This made him a legitimate member of the royal line, yet also the product of an incestuous union common in Egyptian royalty to preserve divine purity, but possibly a factor in his health fragility. His youth and the political complexity placed him in an extremely vulnerable position, a pawn in a game of power far larger than himself. To solidify his claim and maintain dynastic continuity, he married his half-sister Enkizanemun, daughter of Akhenaten and Nefertiti, a marriage arranged as was customary for royalty, but in their case marked by personal tragedy and, as we shall see, epic political intrigue. With a pharaoh so young and inexperienced, real power inevitably fell into the hands of regents and advisors. Two figures emerge as the chief architects behind Tutankhamun's throne, the true power holders behind the scenes. Ay and Horemheb. Ay, an elderly influential courtier, had served Akhenaten and possessed great political and religious experience, a true chameleon of the court. Capable of adapting to regime changes, he held the title of vizier, the highest office beneath the pharaoh, and bore the honorific divine father, suggesting a close, almost paternal relationship with the royal family and conferring immense moral and political authority. Horemheb, by contrast, was the commander-in-chief of the army, a powerful and respected general whose loyalty and military competence were crucial for the empire's stability, especially after Akhenaten's neglect. He represented the brute force and order, the capacity to enforce the state's will by the sword when necessary. These two men, each dominant in different spheres in civil and religious governance, Horemheb in the military, formed the true power behind the young pharaoh. They would guide Tutankhamun through the turbulent waters of Egyptian politics, making the crucial decisions that would shape the empire's future. Tutankhamun's ascent was not merely a coronation, it was the start of a complex dance of power, where the pharaoh's youth was both a weakness to be exploited and an opportunity for those around him to consolidate their own influence, and perhaps their own designs on the throne. The image of a boy king on the throne raises a fundamental question: who really held power? Although Tutankhamun was the divine lord of the two lands, the political reality was that the reins of government were firmly in the hands of his regents. Ay and Horemheb were not mere counselors. They were the guardians of the throne, the strategists behind the decisions that would reverse the Amarna heresy and restore order to Egypt. With his vast experience and his position as vizier and divine father, was the political and religious brain of the regency. He had witnessed firsthand the disastrous effects of Akhenaten's heresy and understood the urgency of restoring worship of the traditional gods, especially Amen. His influence was so great that, in some depictions, he appears in an intimacy with the pharaoh unusual for a Nan royal, suggesting an almost paternal bond and deep trust, perhaps even control. He was the chief mentor of the young king, teaching him the complex rituals, the laws of Egypt, and the intricacies of governance, shaping him into the pharaoh the empire needed, or that they wanted him to be. Horemheb, on the other hand, embodied the empire's military strength and security. As commander-in-chief, he was responsible for maintaining internal order and protecting Egypt's borders, which had been neglected during Akhenaten's reign. Political and religious instability had weakened Egyptian authority abroad, and Horemheb was the man tasked with reaffirming Egypt's military power, leading campaigns to restore prestige and control over lost provinces. His presence was a constant reminder that, behind diplomacy and ritual, there existed a force capable of imposing the pharaoh's will and, by extension, the regent's will. The first and most crucial decision of the regency was the reversal of Akhenaten's religious policy. This was not a mere adjustment but a complete turnaround, a dramatic return to millennial traditions. Tutankhaten's name was changed to Tutankhamun, meaning living image of Amen, a clear, unequivocal signal of the return to Amun's cult, the supreme god of the Egyptian pantheon. The capital was moved back to Thebes, Amun's sacred city, and the temples of the god closed, stripped, and even vandalized were reopened and restored with urgency and devotion. Statues of Amun and other deities were reinstated in their sanctuaries, and the priesthood of Ammon, previously persecuted and impoverished, regained its power, lands, and vast wealth. This strategic move pacified a populace battered by heresy and disorder and restored the cosmic order map that Akhenaten had disrupted. The legitimacy of the pharaoh and the prosperity of Egypt depended on this restoration. The famous restoration decree of Tutankhamun, found on a stela at Karnak, details these reforms in language that evokes desolation and hope. It describes an Egypt in ruins, with abandoned temples, forgotten gods, and a nation plunged into sorrow, then proclaims the young king's promise to restore everything to its former glory, to make the gods happy again. Although the decree is attributed to Tutankhamun, it is undeniable that the mind behind its formulation and execution was Ay's, with Horemheb contributing to a lesser extent. They used the young pharaoh as the face of restoration, the divine figure who would bring Egypt back onto its traditional tracks, erasing the memory of heresy. The regency, therefore, was a period of transition and rebuilding, where power was exercised by experienced, astute hands while the young king learned the paths of governance and divinity, being molded to fulfill a destiny that was not entirely his own. The Egyptian court, even in times of stability and prosperity, was a nest of intrigue, ambition, and covert rivalry. In a transition as delicate as Tutankhamun's rainbow king on the throne, powerful regents maneuvering behind-the-scenes tensions were amplified. Power struggles were not merely about who ruled now, but about the direction the empire would take and who would profit from the restoration of order. Reversing the Amarna policy, though necessary for stability, was not a simple process. Some factions still harbored sympathy for Akhenaten's vision or had benefited materially from his reign and the rise of Aten. Conversely, the priesthood of Ammon, stripped of power, lands, and riches for nearly 2 decades, was eager to reclaim influence and perhaps even exact revenge on those who had supported the heresy. The court thus became a true cauldron of factions, each seeking to sway the young pharaoh, consolidate its own position, and ensure its place in the newly restored Ay and Horemheb, though allied in the grand task of restoration, were also potential rivals for supreme power, and their actions during Tutankhamun's regency undoubtedly included maneuvers for the future. The queen herself, Akhenaten, wife of Tutankhamun and daughter of Akhenaten and Nefertiti, played a role suggesting deep, desperate intrigue. After Tutankhamun's premature death and without direct heirs, she found herself in extreme vulnerability. In that context, she penned an unprecedented letter to the Hittite king Suppiluliuma, begging him to send one of his sons to marry her and become Egypt's pharaoh. The letter, recorded in Hittite archives, is a cry of desperation. "My husband is dead, and I have no child. They say you have many sons. Could you give me one of your sons so that he may become my husband? I do not wish to marry one of my servants. I am afraid." The reference to one of my servants was a clear allusion to an Egyptian-born nan-royal, likely Ay or Horemheb, who were positioning themselves for the throne and whom she feared or deemed unworthy of sharing real power. This letter, a document revealing the fragility of the royal line and the intensity of the power struggle, is irrefutable proof of the deep intrigue that followed the boy king's death. The Hittite king's initial refusal to accept the request, followed by the eventual dispatch of a Hittite prince, Zenanza, who was assassinated en route to Egypt, adds another layer of mystery, violence, and betrayal to the intrigue. Who killed the prince? Was it Ay, Horemheb, or another court faction unwilling to see a foreigner on the Egyptian throne, preferring to keep power within Egyptian hands even if that meant internal conflict? The answer remains an enigma, one of the great unsolved mysteries of Egyptian history. But the very existence of the letter and its tragic fallout show that the Egyptian court was a stage for life-or-death power games, where succession was contested ferociously. During Tutankhamun's reign, Ay and Horemheb, while working together to stabilize Egypt and reverse the Amarna heresy, were likely already maneuvering for the future, each building a base of support and eliminating potential rivals. The pharaoh's youth and frail health, as we shall see later, made succession a constant concern and a focal point for the ambitions of the powerful. Every decision, every appointment to an important office, every alliance forged at court was a calculated step on the intricate chessboard of Egyptian politics. Intrigue was not merely a backdrop to daily life. It was a driving force shaping events, determining destinies, and ultimately influencing the lives and deaths of those at the center of power. The young Tutankhamun, though the divine ruler, was a piece in this game, and his life and death would be intrinsically linked to the ambitions and machinations of those around him. Despite the relentless intrigue and the pharaoh's youth, Tutankhamun's reign was a crucial period of reconstruction and renewal for Egypt. Under the firm, astute guidance of his regents, the empire embarked on an ambitious, urgent program to reverse the deep damage caused by the Amarna revolution and restore the religious, political, and social order that had been brutally dismantled. This was a monumental effort, not merely to erase Akhenaten's memory but to bring Egypt back to its former glory, stability, and, above all, its traditional faith. The central, most visible element of this reconstruction was, without doubt, the complete restoration of worship of the traditional gods. With Amun-Ra firmly reinstated at the center of the Egyptian pantheon, the restoration decree of Tutankhamun, a document of immense historical importance, was not just a religious proclamation. It was a powerful political statement, a solemn promise to both the people and the gods. It described an Egypt in ruins, with abandoned temples, destroyed statues, and a nation mired in sadness and disorder, then proclaimed the young king's vow to restore everything to its former splendor, to make the gods happy again, and to bring back the cosmic order and justice. The decree promised that temples now in ruins, their statues smashed or defaced, would be rebuilt, re-equipped, and adorned with greater splendor than before. The priests, who had been dispersed, impoverished, and stripped of their duties, would be reinstated, granted lands, servants, and vast resources to sustain the cults and ensure that sacred rituals were performed with proper reverence. Religious festivals, the backbone of Egyptian social, cultural, and spiritual life, would be revived in full pomp. The restoration of the Opet festival, for example, which celebrated the mystical union of Amun of Karnak with Amun of Luxor, was of utmost importance. This festival was not merely a religious ceremony. It was a grand event that united the country, reinforced the pharaoh's authority as Amun's son, and celebrated Egypt's prosperity and continuity. The revival of these public rituals, with their vibrant processions, sacred barges, and throngs of faithful, helped heal the wounds of heresy, restore popular confidence in divine order, and reaffirm Egyptian identity. In the political and military realm, Horemheb, the army's commander-in-chief, played a vital, decisive role. While Akhenaten obsessively pursued his new religion and his ideal city, Egypt had lost prestige, influence, and control over its foreign provinces, especially in the Levant, where the Hittites and other neighboring peoples advanced. Horemheb led vigorous military campaigns to reaffirm Egyptian authority, restore vital trade routes, and protect the empire's borders. Although specific details of these campaigns during Tutankhamun's reign are scarce, later records were deliberately erased. The fact remains that the Egyptian army was active in defending imperial interests, and Horemheb's command guaranteed strength and determination. Military stability was essential not only for state security but also for economic recovery, as secure trade routes and control over foreign mines and quarries were crucial to Egypt's wealth. Reconstruction also manifested strikingly in art and architecture. Although the Amarna style, characterized by more naturalistic, elongated figures, was suppressed and condemned as heretical, the art of Tutankhamun's period shows an intriguing transition. There is a gradual return to traditional artistic canons, with idealized forms and rigid proportions, yet softened by a naturalism that seems a subtle legacy of the Amarna-era fusion of styles that produced works of great beauty. Artisans and artists, once employed in building Akhenaten, now returned to Thebes, producing magnificent works for restored temples and, of course, for the pharaoh himself. The treasures found in his tomb, from dazzling jewelry and elaborate furniture to weapons and ritual objects, stand as vivid testimony to the wealth, artistic skill, and cultural sophistication Egypt had regained and was now flourishing. In essence, Tutankhamun's reign was a period of deep healing and comprehensive restoration. The young pharaoh, under the tutelage and influence of his powerful regents, became the instrument through which Egypt sought reconciliation with its millennial past, reaffirmation of its traditional faith, and reconstruction of its empire both physically and spiritually. It was a Herculean effort to erase the memory of Akhenaten's heresy and re-establish the cosmic order that was fundamental to Egyptian identity and survival. Although a pharaoh's life was dominated by religious duties, state ceremonies, and complex political decisions, Tutankhamun was, after all, a boy with all the curiosities and longings of his age. It is natural and fascinating to imagine how his daily life unfolded beyond the heavy responsibilities of the throne. The priceless treasures of his tomb, untouched for millennia, offer intimate glimpses of his pastimes, family life, and personal objects, revealing a more human, tangible side of the boy king that often gets lost amid the grandeur of his title. The tomb was packed with items that clearly indicate his interests and passions. He was an avid hunter, as evidenced by the numerous bows, arrows, spears, and even richly decorated hunting chariots found within his burial chamber. Hunting, for a pharaoh, was not merely sport. It was a deeply symbolic royal ritual, a way for the ruler to demonstrate strength, virility, and his capacity to maintain order over chaos, just as the gods hunted the forces of evil and disorder. In addition to the thrill of the hunt, board games such as Sonnet were also present, suggesting he enjoyed moments of leisure, strategy, and perhaps friendly wagers with close companions. His relationship with Queen Akhenaten, his half-sister and wife, appears to have been one of genuine affection despite being an arranged marriage, as was customary for Egyptian royalty to preserve dynastic purity. Delicate, moving images on painted boxes, small shrines, and other artifacts depict the couple in intimate, tender scenes, exchanging flowers, sharing a banquet, hunting together, or simply enjoying each other's company in moments of softness. These representations, so different from the rigid formality of traditional Egyptian art, reveal a personal bond that transcends royal duty. Tragically, the couple's life was marked by profound loss. They had 2 daughters, both of whom were stillborn, as revealed by the tiny coffins containing fetal mummies found in Tutankhamun's tomb. The loss of direct heirs was a devastating personal tragedy for any couple, but for a pharaoh it also represented a grave dynastic concern, adding a layer of melancholy and pressure to the royal couple's existence, who needed to ensure the continuity of the line. The royal palace, where Tutankhamun spent most of his brief life, was a center of luxury, sophistication, and constant activity. He would have had access to the finest foods prepared by specialized cooks, delicate garments woven from the softest fabrics, elaborate jewelry crafted from gold and precious stones, and a vast retinue of servants, eunuchs, guards, and officials devoted to meeting his every need and desire. A pharaoh's education, from the earliest years, was comprehensive and rigorous. It included not only the complex religious rites and state administration, but also hieroglyphic writing, reading of sacred and historical texts, mathematics, astronomy, and likely some form of physical and military training to prepare him for leading the army. He was groomed from childhood to assume the divine earthly role of a king, a living god on earth responsible for his people's welfare and for maintaining cosmic order. Nevertheless, life in ancient Egypt, even for royalty, was not free from challenges and frailties. Health was a constant concern, and Egyptian medicine, though advanced for its time, had its limits. Modern analyses of his mummy, performed with cutting-edge technology, have revealed that Tutankhamun suffered from several debilitating medical conditions. He was diagnosed with malaria, an endemic disease in the Nile region, and with a rare degenerative bone disorder, likely collar disease too, affecting his left foot, leaving it deformed and causing chronic pain. This condition forced him to use walking sticks, a poignant detail that humanizes the pharaoh. The presence of more than 130 walking sticks in his tomb, some richly decorated, stands as a moving testament to his physical fragility and daily struggle with pain. He was not the athletic, invincible pharaoh often depicted in Egyptian art, but a young man with aches, limitations, and a precarious health. Thus, Tutankhamun's life was a paradoxical blend of royal grandeur and human vulnerability. He lived in a world of unparalleled luxury and power, yet faced significant personal challenges and the immense pressures of governing a rebuilding empire. These intimate details help us see beyond the golden mask, revealing a youth who, despite his divine status, was subject to the same joys, sorrows, pains, and pleasures that the human condition imposes, making his story all the more resonant. Tutankhamun's reign lasted only about 10 years. He died around the age of 18 or 19, tragically young for a pharaoh, especially one engaged in the crucial task of restoring order and stability to a shaken empire. His premature death, coupled with the later discovery of his intact tomb, fueled centuries of speculation, conspiracy theories, and mysteries that captured popular imagination. How could a boy king, apparently protected by powerful regents, die so early during such a critical period for Egypt? For a long time, the most popular and dramatic theory was murder. A lesion on the back of his skull, visible in early radiographs of his mummy, led many to believe he had been fatally struck. The court intrigue, the unbridled ambitions of Ay and Horemheb, and Akhenaten's desperate letter to the Hittites all seemed to point toward a dark conspiracy, a palace coup to remove the young king and usurp the throne. However, spectacular advances in imaging technology and modern forensic analyses have begun to unravel the truth behind his death, offering a more plausible and perhaps more tragic explanation. In 2010, a multidisciplinary team of Egyptian scientists, using the most advanced DNA testing and computed tomography, conducted a series of detailed investigations on Tutankhamun's mummy and on other royal mummies from his family. The results were revelatory and reshaped our understanding of his health and death. They confirmed that Tutankhamun suffered from chronic malaria and that he had a degenerative bone disease in his foot, collar disease tooth, that left him deformed and limping. As previously noted, the most likely cause of his death, according to the researchers, was a combination of these factors: a fracture in his leg, perhaps caused by a fall or an accident, possibly a chariot accident, to royal pastime but a dangerous one, which became infected. In a body already weakened by malaria and other health issues, that infection proved fatal. The skull lesion, once viewed as decisive evidence of murder, was re-evaluated and considered more likely to have occurred during the complex mummification process or even post-mortem, as damage after death. Thus, Tutankhamun's death appears to have been more a health tragedy than a premeditated act of political violence. Nonetheless, this does not diminish the complexity and brutality of the succession that followed. With the boy king's death and no direct heirs, the dynastic line was in imminent danger, and a power vacuum opened for the most cunning. Ay, the vizier and divine father, who had been Tutankhamun's chief regent and mentor, swiftly assumed the throne. To legitimize his accession, he married Akhenaten, the widowed queen. Although the marriage may have been forced and short-lived, with the queen disappearing from records soon after. Akhenaten's letter to the Hittites, pleading for a foreign prince, strongly suggests she did not wish to marry Ay, but was compelled by political pressure. Ay's reign was brief, lasting only about 4 years. After his death, Horemheb, the army's commander-in-chief who had been the military arm of the regency, finally ascended the throne, consolidating military power and ushering in a new phase of stability for Egypt, but also a systematic historical erasure. Horemheb, in a shrewd, brutal, and sweeping move, orchestrated a damnatio memoria against Akhenaten's Menkaure. He erased their names from official records, destroyed their monuments, and claimed direct succession from Amenhotep III, Akhenaten's father, as if the Amarna period and its immediate successors had never existed. The goal was to wipe out this era of heresy and instability from official history, presenting himself as the definitive restorer of order and tradition. Because of this campaign of erasure, Tutankhamun and his immediate predecessors were forgotten by Egyptian history for millennia, their names and deeds consigned to dust until the fortuitous discovery of his tomb. Tutankhamun's death, though natural, became the catalyst for a chain of events that culminated in the obliteration of his memory. Ironically, it was precisely this erasure that, centuries later, ensured his immortality and turned him into one of the most famous pharaohs of all time. For more than 3,000 years, Tutankhamun's name was swept from Egypt's official records. He was a forgotten pharaoh, a mere ghost in the vast tapestry of Egyptian history. Yet destiny had other plans for the boy king. In 1922, in the Valley of the Kings, a British archaeologist named Howard Carter, financed by the aristocratic amateur Egyptologist Lord Carnarvon, made the discovery that would shock the world and rewrite history. After years of fruitless digs and on the brink of having his funding cut, Carter's team uncovered a step leading to a sealed doorway beneath the remains of ancient workers' huts. It was the entrance to Tutankhamun's tomb, the only royal tomb in the Valley of the Kings found virtually intact, a miracle of history that had escaped tomb raiders for over 3 millennia. The excitement Carter felt as he made the small opening and peered inside, with Carnarvon's famous question, "Do you see anything?" and Carter's breathless reply, "Yes, wonderful things," is one of the most iconic moments in archaeological history. An instant that froze time and opened a window to a forgotten past. What Carter and his team found inside the tomb was an unprecedented treasure, a time capsule of a pharaoh's life and death. Thousands of artifacts, from dazzling jewelry and elaborate furniture to weapons, chariots, statues of gods and servants, even food and clothing, all intended to accompany the king on his journey to the afterlife, lay untouched, waiting to be revealed. The climax of this spectacular find was the discovery of the solid gold sarcophagus, containing 3 anthropoid coffins nested within one another, each more richly decorated than the last. Finally, within the innermost coffin lay Tutankhamun's mummy, adorned with the iconic gold lazuli funerary mask, a serene, majestic face that would become the universal symbol of ancient Egypt. The discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb was not merely an archaeological find of epic proportions. It became a global cultural phenomenon that captured the imagination of millions. News spread like wildfire, and the public was instantly fascinated by the King Tut, a young pharaoh erased from history, who now emerged from the depths with unparalleled splendor. The wealth, beauty, and sheer quantity of the artifacts revealed Egyptian artistic sophistication and civilization's grandeur in a way no previous discovery had. Suddenly, a minor, forgotten ruler became the most famous of all, his image plastered on books, films, documentaries, and exhibitions that drew record crowds worldwide. The so-called Pharaoh's Curse, a series of mysterious deaths among the excavation team and their associates, including Lord Carnarvon's death a few months after the tomb's opening, added a layer of mystique, sensationalism, and legend to the story. While most scientists attribute the deaths to natural causes, diseases contracted in Egypt, or simple coincidence, the curse narrative fed popular fascination and ensured Tutankhamun's story remained shrouded in mystery and danger. Regardless of the curse, the fascination with Tutankhamun only grew, turning him into a cultural icon that transcends time and geography. Tutankhamun's legacy, therefore, is a profound irony of history, a pharaoh systematically erased from memory by his successors, whose tomb was modest compared with other New Kingdom greats. Yet because it remained untouched for millennia, it became the most complete and spectacular window into an Egyptian king's world. His discovery not only revealed a king's life, but also gave us unprecedented insight into ancient Egypt's culture, religion, art, technology, and daily life. He became a silent ambassador of a millennial civilization, speaking through his treasures and his story, inviting us to unravel the secrets of a glorious past. Tutankhamun's journey from forgotten boy king to global icon is a rich, complex tapestry of power, intrigue, reconstruction, and finally a rediscovery that defied time. He was not a great conqueror like Thutmose III, nor a monumental builder like Ramses II, whose names echo with the force of their deeds. His reign was brief, and he was largely a figure in the hands of powerful regents, a young ruler navigating a sea of political and religious turbulence. Yet his story is a fascinating microcosm of an Egypt in transition, an empire struggling to redefine itself, to heal, and to restore its identity after Akhenaten's revolutionary heresy. Beyond the golden mask, we find a young king who inherited a legacy of chaos, who became the face of a religious and political restoration of epic proportions, and whose life was marked by personal challenges, health fragilities, and the ruthless complexities of the Egyptian court. His premature death and the subsequent erasure of his memory testified to the brutality of Egyptian politics and the fleeting nature of power. But his rediscovery reminds us of history's enduring power and archaeology's ability to bring the past back to life, revealing truths that time tried to hide. Tutankhamun teaches us that even the youngest and seemingly least powerful can become catalysts for great change, or at least symbols of it. He reminds us that history is made not only of grand battles and imposing monuments, but also of silent intrigues, decisions made behind the scenes, personal tragedies, and the unyielding resilience of a civilization. His tomb a treasure of beauty, knowledge, and mystery continues to invite us to look beyond the golden shine and to uncover the depths of an empire that, for a brief, turbulent moment, had a boy king on its throne, whose legacy grew far beyond his short life. Which aspect of Tutankhamun's life or his era surprised you most? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this journey into ancient Egypt, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss our next historical explorations. Until next time.